Tyler, so today we got Austin on the podcast, and Austin's someone I know. We've been chatting for well over a year at this point. But before recording the podcast, he hopped into the studio. You weren't on yet, and he goes, "Nick, I got this crazy story. I'm like, stop talking. I'm like, the rule of a podcast is we don't talk until I hit record." So we're gonna get right into a story here that I know that other people are gonna relate to. It's the challenge of what we face, especially when it comes to permitting and building inspections and inspectors. Um, so we're gonna jump into that, but we're also gonna do something a little different today, right?
What are we going to do that's different?
Well, we're gonna have a guest host. And that guest host is none other than Jeff Sweenor. Jeff, what's up, man?
All right, guys.
Amazing.
Thanks for the invite.
Hell yeah. Well, I think Tyler and I were chatting last time. You were on the podcast a couple weeks ago, and we hung up. And I think I texted you, but me and Tyler were like, we got to get Jeff on more. He's got an interesting perspective. You're, as Tyler says later in this podcast, no offense, but you've been in the business longer than us,
Seasoned.
right?
Yeah.
and
well seasoned.
And I think that is something that there's a lot of value to that. And I think that we all have different businesses, we all are at different points in our career, and it's a great perspective. And Austin, he's younger than all of us, and he's aggressive and working through the challenges and the nuances of being not a business owner, but an operations manager in a big company doing a lot.
Right.
Yeah, I think sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, Jeff, but the reason the podcast has always worked, in my opinion, past, present, the guests and the hosts have always had independent and unique positions and perspectives of the industry. So I think that you obviously, Jeff, have a different perspective than Nick and myself, different type of business, a different type of career, longer career than we have had. So I think that was the goal with us, was just to really provide a unique insight and perspective into the industry, and something that's just different than Nick and myself can provide.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to share, 35 years, whatever anybody in this business is going through right now, chances are very good that I've been through it, good, bad, or indifferent. And yeah, always happy to share whatever wisdom that I can impart, so that maybe someone can get there a little faster. Happy to.
Have you we're not gonna ruin the surprise, but have you ever had Austin's issue that he's experiencing?
Oh yeah. I mean, not to that degree, but yeah, certainly we've missed inspections through lack of communication, especially before it was sort of online. Now it's a little bit more automated, but it used to be, you had to pick up the phone and call. And but I think that the important lesson in that is that you establish the relationship with your building department or any building department to where you posture yourself and your company as being very thorough and very follow the rules and ask the right questions, so that when a hiccup does come, you at least have some credibility to be able to say, hey, Mr. Inspector, I got to tell you, we missed one, and I'm hoping that you can work with me here, because you've done inspections for us for years, and we've always been responsive, and blah blah blah. So that's the message, and my takeaway in that is that this stuff's going to happen, but it's that relationship that you establish. Now, if you do it time and time again, and you're always trying to skirt the issue, and you're always trying to get one leg up, then you may not get that gratitude. You may not get that pass. So that's sort of my takeaway from it.
Andersen Windows knows that the products they manufacture are part of the legacy that we're all trying to build.
From Fibrex composite material that delivers performance and looks at a budget-friendly price point to the Easy Connect reinforced joining system that makes it easier to assemble oversized window walls with less people, to Andersen's best performing A series product line with the most energy efficient windows and doors Andersen has ever offered. Whatever your building needs are, they've got you covered.
Andersen knows it's about fewer callbacks and products that will perform over time. And that's why they test and test and test their products beyond the threshold required by the industry. Visit AndersonWindows.com to learn more. Those busy summer months are coming, but as temps heat up, it doesn't look like the construction industry's labor shortage is cooling down, and neither is demand.
So, with this challenge of too many jobs and too few workers, how can you ensure your business stays afloat this year? The solution lies in leveraging technology.
Buildertrend is providing a comprehensive guide on how to navigate the labor crisis and maximize efficiency inside this free resource. You're going to discover the following: 5 strategies for making the most of your team, an overview of the labor crisis and where we stand now, and tips from a chief economist at Builder Magazine.
Now's the time to start preparing for success in 2024 by downloading this free ebook at buildertrend.com/labor shortage.
Well, Austin jumped on before we were recording, and he said, "Man, do I have a story for you?" So I'm not even like, we're not doing intros, nothing. I just want to hear the story because that's what you led with. So
Yeah.
what's up?
Do you want to know what happens when you forget to call in a framing inspection
I do.
and then finish the house?
I do.
Well, I can tell you, I found out this morning.
What happened?
So we built a pretty small spec house over on the corner of town, and it's been kind of handed off to a few different PMs, and it's been in a newer PM's hands, basically from framing on. And I don't think we gave them the right tools or checklist or anything. But anyways, mechanical, electrical, plumbing inspections all passed. Assumed we're good to go with insulation, drywall. Now the house is done. The closing is Thursday. It's sold. And called in final inspection yesterday, and they were like, the city was like, well, there's no rough inspection passed on here for framing. So we put our heads together and we're like, I didn't call it in. Did you call it in? I didn't call it in. John, did you call it in? Nope, I didn't call it in. Never happened. So that house basically gets gutted.
No
way.
That's the stance of the city as of right now.
What? Are you serious?
We're negotiating with what feels like robots at the moment, but we're trying to get to a real human being to have a real conversation. But the 2 people that we've talked to, one being the inspector who showed up this morning, took 2 steps inside and said, yeah, you got to take the sheetrock out. And then 2 being the head building inspector, who's kind of covering the back of his inspector and saying it's his job, it's his call. So
couldn't you get a third-party architect or a third-party engineer to sign off on
We
it?
suggested the third-party inspection, thermal cameras, PE sign reports, no liability for the city. I mean, it's a 1,200 square foot house with no interior bearing walls, clear span trusses all the way across. Like, it's the most simple building on the face of the earth.
Yeah.
And they no-go'd all of that. So as of right now, we are trying to figure it out, but planning on probably having to gut this house.
How about a partial, removal? Like if you went into a bedroom and got into
I feel like
a
it'd be
closet
easier
wall.
to tear the outside off.
I think so too.
Yeah.
He said all exterior walls, insulation and drywall has to come out. Interior walls, he would probably let us get away with just doing one side of the wall.
What a guy.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Austin, are you like in an okay state to be on this podcast right now?
Right.
I'm not well, no.
I feel like when you just started explaining that story, I could see in your, like, I know what you feel like. It's like in your chest and your throat right now, like of you're just.
Yeah, I don't know what to do.
Yeah. It's weird.
Other than just go there with a sledgehammer.
I mean, we can sit here and bash the opinion of these inspectors, which does no good. But the fact that they're not willing to take a third party,
Right.
remove the liability. I mean, that's
That's what that was our first
foolish.
suggestion.
That's foolish, right? Like they're, think about it like a high-rise construction. Those inspectors are walking around. They're not signing off anything. Everything's passed back to the structural engineer and affidavits and so on and so forth. This sounds like, I hate to say it sounds like a power move here.
It feels like a power move.
What community?
Sioux Falls, South Dakota is where I live.
About try going up the ranks to town manager or town council or
We've got a call into the head of building services who we have a decent rapport with. So I'm hopefully that's kind of our last straw to grasp at, I think.
Yeah.
So hopefully by the end of the day, we get a call back and he's at least willing to go walk the house and have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
So far, nobody's been willing to do that.
Are there Austin? Are there specific like we have hurricane tie downs? Do you have certain tie downs that are required?
Yep.
And,
yeah.
and
So on this one, we use
the
the trusses that go through the top plate, or the screws that go through the top plate into the truss. Yeah.
And no documentation, no photo, no video, no scan.
We have some scattered photos. But yeah, like I said, this has been kind of a back burner project.
Yeah.
Handed off a few times. Never really made its way into our process or our system.
Probably a large reason.
I think you just found yourself a process.
Yeah. No, I was up till probably midnight last night. I've got like a 300 to 400 line item checklist of what needs to be done to build a house now.
Yeah.
After finding out about this yesterday.
I mean, the process of either videotaping or using a Matterhorn camera, one of those,
Matterport,
and like
Matterport,
I think we're
right.
pretty decent on the commercial side, and in our like customs that those guys are taking pictures of everything.
Yeah,
everything gets documented. Do a pretty good job. This one just small project. Everybody kind of let our guard down.
You work in this municipality a lot?
Yeah, like as far as building permit fees go, like we're probably top 3 or 4 in paying the city to build things.
That just is crazy to me that I don't know. At least in my area, there's some inspectors in townships that can be a hassle, but if you build there enough and something happened, they're generally not going to be complete assholes. If I could see if it was like a town you never worked in before and you're like this new name coming in and yeah, we've never done any job here and we just happen to forget our frame inspection. I mean, they had all the rough inspections done, like electrical, plumbing, and everything else.
Yeah, foundations was done, electrical, plumbing, HVAC, everything was good.
And you had an insulation inspection already?
That's not required here.
Oh. They don't require an insulation inspection, but they're so concerned with a frame. Maybe they do, and they're just trying to cover their asses. They're like, you know what? We didn't do the insulation inspection. Let's get him to rip it out.
You know what I'm thinking about the fact that this is going to be live a week from now, and I wouldn't put it past a dozen or so people to be calling that municipality and being, listen, guy, I just heard the story last week. Let this guy go.
That'd be great. Let's start a petition.
I don't know if you want that.
Insulation.
Say it again, Jeff.
What's that?
What kind of insulation is in the wall?
It's R15 bats.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, bats.
Yeah, we didn't foam it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a
that would be
little bit easier.
So it was a spec project. Were you slated to make money on it?
Like a little bit, not a ton.
And I mean, will it cover the cost of redoing? Like, will this be a break even or will it be a major loss?
Major loss.
Major loss. Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, like probably major enough to try and figure out an insurance claim.
Yeah.
Like to gut this place and put it back together, probably north of 50, 60, 70 grand by the time we're all done with it. And it's like I said, it's a 1,200 square foot house.
Yeah.
What the price on it was, I think, $360. So yeah, we're not squeezing.
That's what you sold it for?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's crazy.
It's just a slab on grade.
Yeah.
Really simple house.
No, I know.
The backstory here is we did the whole development and sold off all the lots, and then bought one back. We were going to build a house for one of our employees. And then, time went by and he wasn't really interested anymore. So we had the lot. We just planned a house, built a house, kind of fit in with the neighborhood, just to kind of get the thing off our books, basically. Try and make a couple bucks out of the deal.
Woof.
Yeah,
that's tough. So, Austin, one of the things I find most interesting about what you guys do, you do such a wide range of projects. And you and I have been chatting for a while now, just on and off. You've been to some of our events, and that seems to be the one thing that is hard, right? Like you're doing these massive multifamily projects, then you're doing a custom, and now I'm hearing about this 1,200 square foot spec, which is probably not a typical project for you guys, but it's on the books, right? So what, like, do you think that that's playing a role into, obviously this is an extreme example and it sucks, but there's a lot of lessons to be learned here, right? And you stayed up all night and put together this 400 point checklist. you know it, Talk to me a little bit about, like, all that you do have going on, and your thoughts on it.
Yeah, like you said, we do a bunch of multifamily in various different ranges, from Class A to Class B to workforce housing. And that's in our commercial division. We've done some build outs and some like retail space too in the past. Don't do a ton of that. Have a couple smaller ones ongoing right now. And then we kind of have drawn a firm line between our commercial group and our residential group now. They're separate, not separate companies, but they operate as separate companies per se. In that residential group, we'll do 2 to 4 customs a year. Ideally, larger, more luxury-driven homes, and then we'll slip in a remodel or two in the right neighborhood for the right person, if it makes sense, just for some winter work to keep guys busy if there's not a ton going on. But yeah, I think there's a lot of different, like, my brain goes in a lot of different directions, and over the course of any given day, shifting gears between what the expectations are on 144 unit multifamily development for level of product and quality and expectations, and then driving 2 miles down the road to a $4 million custom home where it's 180 degrees different in what, like, obviously we want to build high quality things, but I think you understand that the expectation is different in a custom home versus a workforce housing development.
And you're overseeing both. So your title, I think, right, is director of ops. Like, you don't have ownership in the company. You're running operations for both commercial and residential.
Yeah.
So what, like, to those that are listening, like, what's your day-to-day look like besides chaos?
Mostly chaos. A lot of phone calls. A lot of planning, like just pre-construction planning, ongoing construction planning, trying to remove barriers from our PMs and superintendents to make their life and their job a little bit smoother. I read a lot of purchase orders and subcontracts. Spend just a boatload of time on the phone most days. I don't know. That kind of sums it up. Chaos is a good way to sum it up most days. It's organized to a degree, but still somewhat chaos.
I know. I just, like, I think that we've all been in that position. Jeff, I'm sure, like, you've been in the position where you deal with a situation like this. Something goes completely wrong, and you're forced to learn from it, right? And not only that, but, like, you stay up all night trying to figure out, how to fix it. Like, this morning, I woke up stressed out about something, and I remember I went to the gym, and I worked out for 20 minutes, and I was like, I can't be here. I have to go. I have to go to work right now. And I just went to the office, and I got in here earlier. And the truth is like, I would have figured it out later on, but I was so engulfed by this thought that I needed to focus on it right then and there. And truthfully, you don't need that 300 point checklist today, but you were like, it's so top of mind. Jeff, you talked about that on your episode. Like, I know you can relate to what Austin's going through.
Just to get a little bit more perspective on this, like, with your process and the standard operating procedure, on which jobs and who's responsible for ensuring that inspections take place? Would that be you?
No, we have a project manager assigned to every job that handles that.
And the PM just happened, this just slipped through the cracks. Like
But in this case, the guy that we handed this job off to at the framing stage is a trim carpenter that's worked for us for a while, and we wanted to get him some project management experience. So I think we just didn't give him very good direction. And neither myself nor our head of residential guy did a good enough job of checking in with him to make sure some of these critical things got done.
And has he done at like management type tasks before, or is this really the first thing that he's doing, or has it just been on a smaller scale?
On a smaller scale, yeah.
Have you, I mean, I would assume you guys have spoken to him at this point.
Yeah, and we were just talking about it before I hopped on. So we've got myself in the operations role, and then a guy named John, who's our head of residential, kind of oversees all of things in the field. And we were talking a little bit before, like there's no need to bring him in and chew him out. Like neither one of us really think it's his fault.
But he's aware of it at this point, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. He's the one that called in the final inspection and found out that there was no rough. So then he calls us and he's like, "Hey, I think we have a problem."
When did you say the closing was, Austin?
Thursday.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, the house is done.
I mean,
I think to answer Nick's question, I think from my perspective at least, the feeling to like need to address it and solve it and fix it and create a process right away for me is I feel guilty. I feel like it's my fault. I feel like I let the PM down. I feel like I let John down. I feel like I let the person who's buying the house down, and overall like our company down. This is going to cost us a bunch of money. So I feel like I just want to do everything in my power as quickly as I can to make sure this never happens again.
I get that, and I understand. To me, like this slip up is obviously it's a huge deal, and it could end up costing people a lot of money. But it's the other end of the spectrum is that like a missed inspection could. That's not like it doesn't seem like it's that uncommon, right? Yeah, it's like, all right, we have these inspections lined up. This is just the order of operations. We need to get our roughs in before. But like you said, I don't think this is something that you need to bash or beat over this guy's head because of this mistake. Like this is just something that could slip through the cracks as easy as like misframing and opening. And it seems like it's so easy to not forget this, that at the other end of the spectrum is like, yeah, you could easily just not, like I've easily not scheduled final inspections because it's like, I'm going to do this and I'm going to close this out. Then before you know it, a million other things happen and you didn't close out a final inspection. So I like it's one of those things where there's everything in place for this to happen and it absolutely should not happen. But at the end of the day, this is one of those circumstances where it's just like shit does happen.
Yeah. And like the sun will come up tomorrow. Like it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. If we have to tear the house apart, tear the house apart.
How long has the like city or township known about this? Is this just like immediately? Have you guys dealt with them? Has it been days, weeks?
Days.
So like I would.
So we called in final yesterday and found out that we had a problem.
So I think even everything that you're suggesting to them, this is probably something new that they are experiencing. I would imagine that there's probably alternative options for moving ahead with this. It's just they want to ensure, without giving you an answer immediately, like they want to ensure that their ass is covered.
Yeah, and that's what I said when the inspection report came back. So this has to be their first step, is that they have to tell us we need to tear the house apart, and this is where the negotiation starts.
Yeah, I mean it just doesn't, as long as you guys or whoever is buying the house, or if you can close the permits out and there's liability and a path of liability from an engineering standpoint, and like it's going to cost you money one way or another. Nobody's going to sign this over, but like I wouldn't right now hang your hat on the fact that it's like, yeah, there's no option but to tear this house apart, because that just seems asinine. And I'm sure that everyone understands that that is asinine.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And I think that they're probably frustrated, just as you are. But again, I don't think that they're going to tell you you can do one thing and then find out down the road that they're putting themselves in a bind. So I'm sure that they're going to play hardball initially. But I would be interested to see how this really plays out, because in my experience, it was a mistake. Nobody did it intentionally. It's
Yeah.
not a money grab. It's not, you had every other inspection done and everything was up to snuff. I mean, you even had rough inspectors walk through, who I would assume, if your job site was a mess or there was glaring issues, that they could probably communicate that. But I would assume that you'll be able to find a solution to this that doesn't involve gutting a house. That just makes no sense to me.
I'd like to think so. You know what's funny about it?
There's nothing funny about
He's,
it.
he said it happens roughly once a year.
Geez.
This guy. Come
Like,
on,
how
man.
if that's the case, how don't they have
Policy.
Like, they know the house is being built. They probably drive by it. They're like, ha, that guy did not call his rough inspection in. Can't wait.
I don't know at what stage they find out that it happened. Like, he could have just hung drywall and been like, oh, crap.
Yeah.
We got to get a framing inspection. Quick, take that off. We'll put it back on next week.
Austin, I take it the buyer doesn't have financing. Otherwise, you would have had to have delivered a CO
Correct.
by now for the bank. So
Correct. Yep. They're flexible. I think from their end, it'll work out. If they want to, ultimately, I mean, we have to give them the opportunity to back out of the deal if this gets delayed by a long time. And that'd be fine. It wouldn't be the end of the world for us.
Tyler, I think Tyler's right. I think this is just their immediate reaction, and it needs to be, they need to basically take a breath and be like, all right, where's our liability here? And right now they're assuming that they're liable. And until, Tyler, when you said that, it actually reminded me of, when I was prior to starting my company, and we were working on a high-rise project, and I'll never forget, this was a similar situation, Austin, is that we're walking through the floor, and there's precast panels going up, and then they get insulated with mineral wool on the backside, and there's these voids in all these panels, and there's a guy cutting foam insulation to fill the void with. And we walk by it, and the architect says, whoa, you can't, this is a high rise, you can't use foam. Foam's not allowed in anything over like 8 stories or something like that. And he's like, why would they install foam there? That's supposed to be mineral wool. And I'm like, oh shit, like, how did this get missed? So we go back, and he said it all needs to be ripped out. So I'm in charge at this point. I tell them to stop doing what they're doing and go backwards. And they go down, and we're building, it's multiple stories. So like some floors are already finished. So then I get a call, and they're starting to remove drywall, and they're like, how far, like there's units that are painted below. Are we continuing to remove? How far down are we going? Yeah. And I got the kibosh. Like, everyone's like, hold on, stop, pause. This is insane. We cannot tear everything apart. It was literally a 2-inch by 4-inch piece of foam. And
for fire or what?
No, it was simply just like filling a void in the back of a precast panel. So what, like, hey, why is this foam? Like, why would you guys install foam? It got hashed incorrectly on the drawing. So mineral wool gets hashed one way, foam gets hashed a different way, and that's it. It was just hashed incorrectly. It wasn't called out as foam. It simply was hashed wrong. And so it was this immediate reaction of rip it out. You guys, this is a huge issue, blah, blah, blah. It's a fire issue. To fast forward where everyone was like, hey, there's a kind of, everyone's a little bit responsible here. We're good. Like, we'll write an affidavit. We'll say that this was, this isn't a big deal. It's less than 1% of the insulation. Like, we're good. And we moved on. And I think that's like, I felt the exact same way you did. I guess maybe a little different, where I was just a PM at that point. So I didn't have a ton, I just thought I did something wrong. But ultimately it was this immediate reaction of like, you have to undo it. And that's the only option, where once the dust settled, they realized, hold on, we can be realistic about this. On the complete other end of this, like, it's also very wasteful. Like I feel like you could get plenty of support in the sense of like this is just pure wastefulness in terms of material and manpower and everyone's money, time and time.
Very much so. So you guys want to talk about something else or what?
Well,
I'm just trying to figure out why well, no, we don't have to.
Oh, we can keep diving into it.
well, we're gonna
Problem's not going away.
you got someone I feel like you got someone coming up behind you.
Oh, we're good. Office is all windows.
Jeff, in terms of like standard operating procedures, how have you guys implemented it? Because like now, like you guys have you're doing, you have sawdust coming out, you're teaching, you're educating not only your own guys but you're educating the industry. um talk to talk to me a little bit about how you've implemented standard operating procedures and how you've learned from big mistakes like something like Austin's going through.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm still learning, right? That learn is not a noun. It's it's a verb, and it's always happening. So, for now we have standard operating procedure. We have process documentation. We have checklists. And obviously framing inspection is on the checklist, just like plumbing. But to say that we've never missed one, I can't say that. I'm sure we miss one a year. It may not be as impactful as the one that Austin's going through right now, but it might be roof nailing before it gets ice and watered. There might have been rain on the way, and everybody just, you know, sheets it off and then puts ice and water on and worry about the consequences later. But it's happened, and just don't lose the lesson. That the pain of a mistake is hard enough, but don't let the learning part you know subside. That should at least happen. Um, yeah, it's documentation. We're on Buildertrend now, and it's part of that every week. And but there are other things that are that happen, and it's you just keep learning and keep getting better. Don't make the same mistake twice.
What happens if you do? Like, what's your reaction to that? And that's for you and like, if I guess Austin, if this PM were to miss another framing inspection, like, what's your reaction then?
It's probably twice the initial reaction, because you've had it happen to you. Don't let it happen to you again. And if it does, that's pretty serious grounds, in my opinion.
I think if it did happen again, it would still be our fault as leadership for not putting some type of a policy or procedure in place that makes it damn near impossible.
Yeah.
Well,
to forget
you're
that
right. If he did it again and you hadn't put anything in place, then yeah, the onus is on you.
Yeah, then it's our fault.
In our case, we at some point, put this into a document that needs a check off to happen. So, yeah.
I brought this up a couple episodes ago. Is one of the builders in my Builder 20 group had built this checklist, and it's a 200-page Word document. And for everyone that DMs me asking me if I can share that document, I cannot. I literally signed an NDA saying I would not share it. But it is a product of 40 years in business, and he's just always added to it. Like, this is, add this step, and I've went through it, not all 200 pages, and it, on one hand, it's like, man, this is awesome. Like, you literally can just go through and check things off and know you're building a house the right way. But on the other hand, it's like, but then, like, when does it become this crutch where if it's not on the list, it doesn't get done? And I think about, like job descriptions, that's something that, I've talked a lot about, where it's this delicate balance between being all encompassing, but a little bit gray, so they know that they can veer out of their lane for a minute when they have to wear a different hat. Austin, have you putting that checklist together and job descriptions, like, have you struggled with that?
Yeah, very much so. I think so. A little history on Veldhouse construction.
You know what? Actually, that's a good point that I was just thinking about now. Sorry to interrupt. Let's rewind because we started off super hot with that what you started speaking to us about. But how about for those who may not know you, we just get some background. I'm curious, if you grew up in the Sioux Falls area, what your background looks like, how you got into construction, just so that our listeners have a better idea of who you are. And then I think maybe even just touching on like some things that you do for your job and for your company that make you happy on a daily basis, challenge you on a daily basis, and give you some gratification, because right now I'm sure that you are probably not feeling very much gratification doing what you're doing.
It's all good. Background on me: I did not grow up here. My wife and I have lived here for, I think we're coming up on 7 years now. I grew up in about an hour down the road in Iowa, small town. Um, Background education wise, I went to school for accounting actually, and then took that accounting degree and went and worked in a window factory for a couple of years on the floor, which I did really enjoy.
Hold on, you took your accounting degree and went and worked on the floor of a window factory.
Yeah, good use of money to get that degree.
So you actually didn't use your accounting degree at all?
I actually did. So after a couple of years, I worked at Pella in the factory. After a couple of years of that, I wanted to try to use my accounting degree. So I went and took a corporate finance job for a restaurant chain and hated it. So about 2 years of that. And then I went to work for a really big industrial electrical contractor, also as an accountant. Did that for a year and then shifted into a project-based role and managed projects for them for about 5 years before making the jump to come work here.
And so you were in Iowa throughout that entire time period, or had you
No, when I
moved?
went to work for the electrical company, we moved here.
Okay. And did you
So
move there
I worked
for
here.
that job?
Yeah, I could have worked in Iowa, but my wife's parents live here. She wanted to be closer to her parents. Sioux Falls is like a pretty natural gravitation from where I grew up to people who want to live in a little bit of a bigger town.
But I mean, South Dakota as a whole is a pretty it's not a super high population or like population density, right?
No, not at all.
So
So Sioux
from
Falls is the biggest city in the state. It's like 200,000 roughly in the metro area.
so moving from where you lived in Iowa to Sioux Falls, what was that transition like? Was it like a parallel move? Was it busier? Was it less busy, like from a lifestyle perspective?
At first, I really didn't like it. When we moved here, we moved kind of right smack in the middle of town into a house that we could afford at the time, which was kind of a dumpy house in kind of a dumpy neighborhood. So I really didn't like living here for the first couple of years. And then we had our first kid. We moved into a little bit nicer neighborhood, and things kind of slowed down a little bit. And since I'm really happy here now, I feel like I can kind of be happy anywhere. But we've got roots here. My wife's family's here. We're pretty involved with, my daughter's in school now, and we're involved with church, and I kind of work with all my friends. So we've got some pretty deep roots here now, it feels like, and they're in a pretty good spot.
How old's your daughter?
I got a 5-year-old daughter, a 3-year-old daughter, and a 1-year-old son.
Oh, nice. Keep him busy.
Yeah.
So transitioning from the accounting side and like the back end of business to managing for the electrical contract or whatever it may have been, what gravitated you towards that, and what did you find more enjoyable with that compared to what you were doing prior to that? Like, what made that stick for you?
Well, what I didn't like most about like the finance world and the accounting world was how cyclical that whole world is. It's you can repeat the same process basically month over month over month to get ready for month ends, and then you got bills to pay, and it's just the same cycle every month. So it gets pretty boring. It did for me at least after a few cycles once you kind of get the hang of things. I grew up in and around construction in different areas. My dad worked for a framer, worked for a builder for a few years. He did a bunch of different stuff, but that was part of it. I worked for a drywall and painting contractor for probably 10 years throughout like middle school, grade school, college, in the summers and off time. It was just, and I liked it. And then when we got married, we gutted and flipped our first house, and I really liked that process. And yeah, just generally wanted to be involved with construction somehow. And it seemed like the transition from um, company to company, when I went from the finance job at the restaurant chain to the finance job at the electrical contractor, I could see like some type of a path to getting into project management through that transition. And that was always kind of my plan when we made that jump. And it just all happened to work out pretty fast.
When you flipped your house, were you self-performing a bunch of that work?
Yeah. I don't know that I've paid anybody to work on any house that I've owned yet.
And you enjoy that hands-on aspect of it?
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit less so now that we have 3 kids and life is busy and I don't feel like I have time for it. But yeah, it's fun.
Just with regard to on your own home, or are you opposed to that? Like, is that not something? Obviously, you went the management route rather than hands-on. Was that because you saw that to be like a more lucrative career path, or you just found more enjoyment in the management versus being hands-on?
I think if I had my way, it'd be a little bit more of a mixture of both.
Yeah.
There's times that I really like the operational side of things and the strategic side of running the business, and then there's a lot of times where I'd rather just put headphones in and go work.
Like now, like right today.
Right now would be a great time to just put headphones and go work. Yeah.
I feel like that's everyone's goal.
I think so too. Everybody wants the best of both, and it's just hard
like
to do.
there, like Jeff, do you ever put the belt back on?
Only for my own projects. If I'm doing something in my house or
It's just not enjoyable when you do it on your own house, though.
Not at all. Like we at our spec house, we have rock wool going on the exterior of the foundation, and my waterproofer was like, no, we don't install rock wool. And so then I was going to hire someone. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to do this myself. And I called one of the guys at Rockwell. I was like, hey, his name's Nick. I'm like, do you want to come and help me install this stuff? He's like, yeah, sure. No problem. I'm like, we'll film some content. It'll be fun. Like, it'll be great. And we knocked it out in 3 hours. It looked great. It worked. Got it done. And I went home. I'm like, man, I feel so much better today.
It was just something done.
I was like, this felt great. Like I have mud all over my pants. I'm not wearing my white sneakers. But I was like, but I couldn't. I know I don't want to do this every day. And hearing you say it, and I feel like a lot of people, they just want the opportunity to wake up. And when they want to run the business, they run the business. When they want to step away from the business, and maybe that's what it is. Is like, when you hear about business and success, and people are like, well, you only have a successful business, quote unquote, is when you are able to step away and allow it to run without you. Where it's like, we all want to be part of the business and we want to help grow the business, but there's something really nice where you're able to go and take your 3 kids on vacation for 2 weeks and then come back and know that, you're plugging right back in. And, I think for us, this industry specifically, that escape isn't always a vacation. It's the opportunity to put the tool belt on and go build some shit.
I always feel like it's whatever. The grass is always greener, right? Like if you're primarily in the field, you probably long for more of a management style position. And if you are managing, you maybe think that putting on the tools belt is going to be the happier choice. I think in a perfect world, having some time split between them is good. I think more importantly, when you are beginning to learn, I think that it is really important to have that hands-on experience if possible. Like for you, Austin, I would assume and venture to guess that you handling the flipping of your first house probably taught you so much as far as how to manage a project with regard to what you're doing now, right?
Yeah, just with the sequence of operations, and obviously you make a bunch of mistakes and learn a bunch of lessons. And yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I can recall our first house, and I got to practice and implement and try things that there weren't the stakes weren't quite as high as working for a customer.
for
So I
sure.
learned a lot. I made a bunch of mistakes. I fixed a bunch of mistakes, and at the end of the day, I couldn't wait to get out of that house because I got tired of looking at mistakes that I was not willing to redo. Um, and that's somewhat of a fear moving forward with any project that I do, where it's like, if you are going to live in that space, how are you going to approach that entire process to almost preserve your sanity? Like if I built my own home, I would be so afraid. Like you always are progressing, and to live with the details that were within your capacity at the stage that you built that house or that space, and be like, well, this is now my forever home that I built when I was 38, and I'm so much better now that I'm 48.
Mm.
Am I going to be happy here in 10 years?
Aren't you building your own house?
That's the plan, and something that I fear at this point, where it's like, what happens when I'm just frustrated and tired, and I'm like, I don't feel like doing this the same way that I would do it for a customer. Am I going to regret that down the road, where it's like 10 years down the road and I have a little bit more time and a little bit more money, and I'm living in the house that's supposed to be our forever house, and I'm like, I just hate what we did here, and but also don't have the energy or the capacity to like rip it out and redo it.
Tyler, I
Yeah.
torn mine down. I 30 years. I built my first house 30 years ago, and
Yeah,
then we love our location, but we knew we were so much better as a builder, so we tore it down and built another one.
tore it down
Yeah.
completely. Yeah, I feel like that's something that I would end up doing. But
It's
then I wonder if you're just like, are you ever going to be happy?
Well, I'll be happy for a while till I feel like we've moved beyond the level that I just built.
Yeah. I guess that's what everyone else does, right? Where it's like we remodel a space and then you live in that for long enough that it's time to remodel it again.
I mean, that it was the same thing when Meg and I did our first project. Tyler, we talked about the fact that I never even finished the house. I was like always 96% done. And then I literally hired an architect to come in and redesign the house. And we end up selling, like, I was convinced of selling it because it just didn't make sense to remodel it again when we just had finished it. But now we're doing the same thing. We're in design, and I fear the same. We're gonna go through this, and then there's gonna be this opportunity where it's like, well, I learned this. I told this story about the truck I've been building for a decade, and I told, I built the chassis and I tore it apart, and I rebuilt it. I built that chassis 4 times, and then I got to a point where I'm like, you know what? I'm just gonna hire the best chassis builder. Brought it to him. I said, here's what I've built. I don't want this anymore. I want you to cut it up. And he's like, well, why don't you sell it? I'm like, because it was never done. And and similar to you, Jeff, like, I was like, I'd rather just tear it down or tear it apart, get rid of it, and start over, because like, I've learned so much in this process. But it's funny, Austin, like, the fact that you've never had anyone work on your house.
I don't think
It's
so.
I think it's like a vehicle. For me, it was a pride thing forever. I changed my own oil. I would swap the motor when it blew up. I swapped the transmission 3 times because it's a Chevy. Like, I would do my own brakes, and it was, I don't know when it was, but there was like a definitely a definitive time where I went from doing all of it to literally doing none of it. Where it's I haven't done an oil change in probably 10 years. Not that I can, it's just I've reevaluated where my time needs to be spent, where I'm just like, you know what?
Yeah.
I'm like 10,000 miles over my oil change. You change it, and there's probably a list of things that also need to be done, and I know I can do them, but I'm just gonna pay the professional to do it?
Oh, my furnace broke last year. I had an HVAC tech come replace the control board on my furnace.
That's a good start.
Come on, you can YouTube that.
I couldn't figure it out, dude. I tried
Really?
4 hours. It was really cold outside. My kids were cold.
You did try it.
Our AC went down this past summer, and it wound up being that like one of the Schrader valves, the internals of it wasn't fully sealed up, so the refrigerant leaked out. But while I was trying to figure that out, I was YouTubing a bunch, and my electrical tools were on the job, so I was outside at midnight with like a light bulb that I had pulled a light fixture that I had pulled out of a fan that was in my scrap metal pile, and I was like testing the electrical with the light bulb and the two leads from that, because all of my electrical tools, and my neighbor's a union electrician. He's like, dude, why didn't you call me? I was like, it was 11:30 at night and we had no AC. So I know the pain. When you started looking for a new job, and you found Veldhouse, were you certain that this is the company that you wanted to work for?
I was not looking at all for a new job, actually, a year
All
or
right.
so when I came here. So Caleb is the owner and president. He and I have played. We go to the same church. We're kind of in the same circles. We know each other, and have played city league basketball together for a few years. And he had been chirping at me for a good year and a half, 2 years, to come work for him. And then Mark and John, two of my good friends, run our residential and commercial group. And so they had both kind of been in my ear too for a while. And I feel like I had a pretty good thing going at the electrical contractor. And I'd actually submitted my application and paperwork to buy into that company like the day before I accepted the job here. So I was about to sign like a lifelong contract there and buy in and become an owner.
And so here. What made you not do that?
One, like, I think this company and the stuff that we're doing and the people that we're doing it with is like, if I could choose anything that I'd want to do, this is the type of stuff I'd want to do and the type of people that I would want to do it with.
Yeah.
So it took me a long time to make the decision, but at the end of the day, it felt like a no-brainer. This is kind of where I belong.
How old were you when you started with them?
With Veldhouse?
Yeah.
31. I'm 32
now. I think there's something to be said for that, as far as maturing and knowing what you want and having a family and everything else that affects your decision making. Why were you really entertaining? Like, what enticed you or intrigued you about possibly signing a lifelong contract to do something in the first place? Like,
it wasn't really a lifelong contract, but it's like the golden handcuffs metaphor.
Sure, but like what was enticing about that to you at 30, 31 years old that you were willing to possibly explore that as a career option?
I think part of it's definitely money, but that wasn't all of it. I think it was the opportunity and like a little bit of a competitive desire. You know, like you get a carrot dangled in front of you at 30 that says, you know, you could be a C-suite level leader at this $500 million national electrical contractor by the time you're 40. And I'm like, man, how could I walk away from that? That's like, people would kill for that opportunity, but it just wasn't really what I wanted to do.
Did you feel like you weren't happy at that point with that career decision in the first place?
No, I was happy there. Like, I liked the people I worked with. I liked the work. I wasn't super passionate about, like, I'm not super passionate about, like, building soybean processing plants, for example. Yeah. That's what that company does, a lot of that type of work, industrial ag. It was good. I was traveling quite a bit, which got old. You'd be in Texas for a few days, be in North Dakota for a few days, in Cincinnati for a few days. And as our family grew, that got a little bit tiring.
So then when you started discussing the potential to work at Veldhouse, what somewhat of the same question, like what enticed you about that? I know that you said it's people that you could see yourself around, it's work that you enjoy, but what did that conversation look like as far as, at this point, I would assume if you had option A that was a fairly serious career move in one direction, that you would have had conversations with them like, hey, I have this opportunity on the table. What are the offerings for me to come spend a portion of my career with you? Like, what was discussed as far as stake in the company or responsibility, to decide to actually go that route?
So we never really talked stake in the company. I kind of left that off the table. So Caleb's a couple of years older than me, has kind of built this thing from the ground up and has 3 sons. So his sons are young. So who knows what'll happen, but nobody's really worried about it now. He treats us incredibly well. He's super generous with time, resources. It's by all accounts, as I was trying to make a decision, everybody I talked to said that it's been an amazing place to work for however long they had worked here. And I feel like the company when I started was kind of starting a pretty significant uptick in size and coolness of projects, I guess, if that's a metric. So it was a really good time to hop on board.
So what was the potential for opportunity for growth within the company intriguing to you?
Not necessarily growth within the company, but helping grow the company
Yeah.
more so. Being able to be a key contributor in the direction of the company and having a say in, what direction it heads or how big it gets, or, being one of the people that's in a driver's seat for this thing.
And what does that look like on a day to day, or it could be a longer term vantage point for you? But how does that play into what you do at Veldhouse? Like, how are you influencing the trajectory of the company?
Well, obviously, I get a say, not the final say, but a say in which projects we do or don't do, which things we do go after or don't go after. On the multifamily side, our commercial group, we're largely part of the development team for all of those projects too. So we do get to kind of drive our own growth, and we fill our own pipeline on that side of the business. So yeah, there's a lot of upfront conversations about land development and which parts of town to go after and what's more attractive than the other thing from a multifamily side of the business. Um, Conversations about hiring, promoting from within, giving people opportunities to grow and develop within their roles, or make a step up out of their role and how to backfill that role.
So what would you say that you're using? Like if a project is coming across your plate and you are going to give your insider perspective onto as to how great of a fit or not great of a fit of a project that might be, what metrics are you using to do that?
Gut feel for the
Okay.
most part. We don't have like a minimum size for a house. We don't have a minimum dollar per square foot.
Do you wish you did?
No, actually, that's a good question, but no.
You like the variety of, everything from a 1,200 square foot spec to a big multifamily?
Yeah, some days I don't. Some days it's hard, but I think it's good overall. Yeah, I want the flexibility to be able to say yes to a really cool project, even if it's a 500 square foot build out for a donut shop, which is one thing that we're doing right now. It's just a really cool project, and I wanted to do it because it's cool.
Dude, I want to build a donut shop so bad.
This one's going to be very cool. It's going to be like early 1900s ice cream parlor type of feel.
That's cool.
He's actually hanging. He's hanging an airplane inside of it.
That's next level. I'm thinking like this little pop up. I just want donuts. Really, is what I want to do. But
I can send you some. They're pretty good.
Well, that's what I was gonna get at, is the fact that, like, you just said that I want the flexibility to take on a cool project when it comes along, and I guess for me, like, that's one of the things I fear, is that when we take on anything and everything, we get into a position where when something does come across our plate that's really interesting, it's this mad dash of either we need to build a team and hire to be able to pull this off, or we have to say no to it. And
that's what the donut shop was for us too. It was presented to us, and I was like, man, we really don't have the guys to do this right now.
mm-hmm.
But it's really cool. So let's figure it out.
Yeah.
Do you think that'll be a profitable project, being that your company isn't necessarily set up to be doing that?
Probably not super profitable, no. Um, but I wouldn't say our goal on every single project is to be ridiculously profitable. Like this particular project, I wanted to say yes to because I have a decent feeling this guy might build a house in the next 5 to 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And we just remodeled his current house last year, and I'd like to be on the top of that call list when the time comes.
I mean, that's
There's a
good.
little bit of strategy behind it too.
Well, that's good mindset because, like, I think a lot of people, like, that's like what's it called? Like EQ. Like you're emotionally understanding that there's a potential for future work, right? Where the more analytical mind would say this isn't going to be a profitable job, pass. And they might go as far to say, yeah, that's fine. When he wants to build a house, he'll come around and we can try to build. We can build his house. But you're looking at it as, well, let's develop a relationship and build him a cool ass donut shop today. So when it does come around, like, there is no other call.
Yeah, it
There's
should be
no
a
bidding it. There's no
no-brainer.
pricing it. There's not like, hey, are you interested? It's, hey, I want you to build my house. And I think I think that should be everyone's goal, is that you want to be in a position where people are, you know, demanding of working with you for whatever reason, whether it's previous relationship or the reputation that you've built over the course of time.
Jeff, being that you're a little further into this than all of us, no offense, how do you feel about the investment or possibly conceding profits on a project for a potential lead down the road?
Yeah, I mean, when you're, for me, when we were first starting in our growth, it took anything and everything, and some of it was commercial, some of it was light commercial, some of it was addition, whatever it was. So you're always making, um, getting the stepping stone toward the next project, and you never knew where your next lead was going to come from. So you just keep sowing seeds until suddenly one turns up. And we've gotten incredibly boring in that we try to focus just solely on high-end custom homes and high-end complete remodels. Like, we don't stray, we don't go outside those lines. And we find that, and that's come with maturity. I wasn't always like that. I was like, always chasing something that I shouldn't be chasing.
Yeah.
But when I finally got to the groove of discipline and selecting projects based on right project, right client, right budget, got to have all three, or else we don't take it. And since that, we've become a much more organized, much more streamlined, a much more profitable company because we've adopted those guardrails, and we stick to them pretty tightly. So it's not always exciting.
Yeah, and no, but I think that, and that was the perspective that I was looking for, because I'm 38, Austin's 32, Nick, what are you, 36?
Mm-hmm.
36. There's probably a bit more ego or hunger to have build the business, get the showcase our work and our capacity and our ability, when in actuality a lot of time that comes as a detriment to our bottom line, right? Taking a job, Nick, because it's like a cool job, right? Like, I feel like Nick's entire career has been based on, like, this is going to be a cool job, but it's not necessarily the most profitable job. And obviously you're building a business, but like, at what point do you cut the cord and realize this is our bread and butter, this is what makes us money, this is what creates the systems within our business to be efficient and profitable, and not worry about taking a job or doing a job for the potential that like the resources that it would take to build a team to execute a job that's outside of your standard capacity seems like so much work, when you could just be building the portfolio that you want, getting the customers that you want, and making the profits that you want by refining and honing who your customer is and what your ideal project is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I go back and forth. Jeff, you said that you've gotten really boring. Like, do you miss doing some of the shit that is more risky, or that you might not make a profit on?
Not anymore. Yeah, not anymore. I mean, it took me. I mean, it literally took me 30 years to figure that out. So,
But would you change, like, if you went back and you could tell yourself at year 5 or 10, like, hey, no, just do this and you'll actually make more money. Would you have taken that advice?
that's a really good question. I had to say no. I wouldn't
Mm,
because, I was always able to pay myself. I always had a job, just didn't have a profitable company. We're just
mhm,
churning, right? Churning. Money comes in, money goes out, and you could never really, you know, gain any traction. It wasn't until, I developed that super honed discipline of really dialing in that dashboard and all of those metrics that we actually started making money. And yeah, so in order to do that, you have to know what you're good at. You have to know what you're efficient at, and that comes with the discipline of saying no to projects that fit
mm,
that criteria that you're just talking about. That's
I was actually sorry, I was just having a conversation with actually the guy who does our porta potties, and he also has like a little side business that does septic
yeah.
repair because he works with a bunch of septic companies. And he's like, yeah, that business essentially just pays to keep people employed. And he understands that it's like an outlet for employees to have more stake within the company. They can do whatever they want with it, but that's not his bread and butter. And he put it pretty much very simply where he's like, yeah, I wanted to be a company that makes money rather than spends
Mm.
money. And that was like very clear when you have a business that spends money to pull peanuts out of it. Like the liability, the risk is so great. When you become a business that makes money, that is when I feel like your business model actually works, where it's not just we're spending money to not necessarily even make money. It's like you said, to just churn, Jeff. You're
mm.
spending how much money to just churn and support a lifestyle. And it's like, this is a lot of
Yeah.
work.
But I mean, to your point, Nick, when you asked me if I would rewind that and change the script, but that churn, all those jobs, that was all experience, and in
Mhm.
one way or another, it was experience, and it brought me to where I am today. And I'm just grateful that I made it this far and that I'm healthy enough to, march forward at this pace for another decade, um,
Mm.
and watch my kids, take over. My kids are your age, so
It's just a shame that it takes
uh,
that like every one of our businesses is so one-off and unique and like proprietary to our own systems and devices and wants, needs, that it takes you that many years of struggling to hopefully like reach that precipice and then crest, and then okay, now it's smooth
yeah.
sailing at this point. And it's like, why does it have to be like that for
It
every
doesn't.
generation and
It
every
doesn't. You
company?
guys are way smarter than I was, so you got a head start, and you're
But
learning at
but
a faster rate.
but and but I think, like, I'm with you, Austin. Like, I'm like you. I want to do the donut shop. We have some other projects going on that are, like, we call the unsexy projects, that are just revenue generators, like allowing us to fill in gaps. And and when a cool project comes along, it's my immediate answer is yes. Yeah, we can do that. I got a call the other day, and it was a development. Like, I mean, like, multiple homes, not even in our state. And they were like, they were like, "Would you build it?" I'm like, "Yeah." And so then I sit down, my team's like, "What?" And I'm like, I mean, it sounds like a cool project. They're like, "Yeah, it does sound like a cool project. When, who, like, how are we gonna?" And I'm like that, but hearing you say it, like, Jeff, where it's like, well, it took me 30 years to understand that. Tyler, you're kind of backing that up, and I know that, and I think about, like, if I could just do only what I want to do, this would be great.
Yeah.
But there's something preventing me from doing that, and it could be that, hey, maybe we're like overstaffed, or we're a little head on our staff compared to the amount of work coming in, or that I just want to have my hand in a bunch of different things, to have the flexibility to kind of bob and weave depending on what happens in, quote unquote, the market,
Yeah.
where it's like, oh, if I need to switch it up and take on a handful of donut shops, and I'm gonna keep talking about donut shops until I build
So
one.
let me tell
Um,
you how I market myself around that scenario. So we have some competitors in our market. Our market is high-end custom homes and renovations, and there are some people in our market that also do condo projects and also do schools and whatnot. And so when I'm talking to a client and I want to know who you were also considering, and they might mention one of those firms, and I might say, that's interesting. I said, we specifically do this day in and day out, and we are very good at it. I would hate to put guys in a situation where they're building a school one week, and now you're going to go build a high-end custom home. So I talk to that same scenario, and that's why I try to get very specific, and we do one thing and do it well. I'm not saying
mm,
that's the right way, that's the right thing, but I'm just telling you what I would be using against you in a negotiation for a client.
yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm jealous, Jeff, of guys like you and Tyler that have the discipline and ability to just be content in your lane and do what you do and do well. But I feel like anytime you put a shiny object up in the corner, I'm going to look at it. I'm going to chase it. And maybe I'm just immature. It's
I
possible.
don't know. I wouldn't
I
say,
don't know. I'll ever grow out of
yeah,
it. I just,
it's
yeah, I would
it's growth.
I would have a really hard time saying no, and not even pricing a really
Yeah.
cool project, even if I didn't think we could do it.
It is definitely a maturity thing. When I was 30 something, I was all over the board. And it wasn't until I was 50 did I put a sign above my computer that says no distractions, and it's stay focused. I, I, I don't know of many 30-year-olds that focused, and I don't think you should be. You guys are young
Mm,
enough and you got enough runway in front of you that you can diversify. You can do that stuff. You can afford to do that stuff. As long as you have you can you can be happy with what you have while you pursue what you want. Like, as long as you have enough money to support your family and do the cool things for your kids and experience the time with them, then it doesn't matter. You have plenty of runway, and I know it sounds crazy. It sounds like it's so far away, but I just turned 60, and I'm just getting warmed up. So there's plenty of runway left. I wouldn't don't take my philosophy as advice, because it's just advice that I gave myself. You guys should still do this crazy stuff until you'll start to narrow your focus as you mature in age, as you mature in your business world. So just try not to make mistakes.
I mean, if you want to just do the crazy stuff, is there something to be said for marketing yourself and just chasing the crazy stuff?
Yeah, I mean, that's what specialty guys are, like,
Yeah.
you see specialty guys that work. I'm sure Nick, in your, in your market and brownstones, and there's guys that just do that, and there are guys that
Yeah.
just do commercial chains of there was a chapter in my life where I was doing some Cumberland Farm conversion, gas station conversions, and it was chasing the shining object. It was being distracted with that looks easy until you figure out that it's not. So I don't think, again, I don't think there's anything wrong with that diversification, as long as there's a means to the end, and it's not just you're not just practicing.
Austin, what do you have the most fun doing?
At work?
Well, just like if what's your, like, right now today, what's your most exciting project?
Without saying anybody's name, I'd say today we call it our Yellowstone project.
Which is what?
It's a modern/transitional, about a 7,000-foot custom home.
Custom home. Yeah.
Very cool house.
And
Very cool design.
and it's your favorite because design?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you
Yep.
what do you like about doing something like the donut shop?
Same thing, design. It's cool. It's
Yeah.
unique. It's different.
It's funny.
The owner of the donut shop wants to do some different stuff.
Yeah.
We're kind of just like flying by the seat of our pants. He doesn't have like much of a real plan. We just meet out there a couple times a week and talk about some stuff, and then I make a few phone calls and
Hey, let's hang an
we
airplane.
get some stuff done. Yeah, exactly. He
Sounds-
sent me a picture last week of the airplane on a trailer parked outside the building. It's like, hey, we need to get the windows out so we can get this in. Like, what? It's
like,
awesome.
What
but-
line item is that?
Yeah, right. Well, that's not my budget anywhere.
Yeah. It's funny. Like, I'm not bullshitting you either. Like, I was talking to an architect specific about a donut shop a couple months ago, and he had posted it on Instagram. And I'm like, and I messaged him, and we're doing a residential project with him. And I was like, hey, keep me in mind for the next donut shop. And he was like, let's hop on a call. I didn't know you guys did commercial. And I said, well, we will do commercial. We don't do commercial. Like, I'm interested in the boutique commercial stuff. And we got to talking, and one of the things, like, Jeff, you brought up is, the guys that are doing high-end residential, like, to bring them over to do a donut shop or commercial. It's just different. And it's like, it's almost not fair, because what's going to like what it would require for those guys to kind of shift into a different gear is just not efficient. So as a general contractor, then okay, well, then you just have a different sub base, right, for a commercial project. But we were talking specifics. He's like, listen, I know you own a mill workshop and you guys do this crazy mill work and we love it, but you can't do that in commercial, right? This is different. I said, no, what I am interested in on the boutique commercial is the fact that it's super fast paced, and it requires you to be more creative with less expensive materials. So it just pushes creativity in a different bucket, where it's like, yeah, that donut shop's going to be super cool because there's an airplane hanging on the ceiling, but your cabinet package isn't, super luxury. It's probably something super utilitarian that can be robust and has a nice looking door front. And I think that for me, like, that's what's interesting about it, is that it pulls creativity in a different direction, where residential, you tend to be higher quality materials, higher quality product, and a lot more attention to the feel of everything, and not so much about pushing limits of material, or pushing limits of how fast something can get done, especially in the restaurant space, or like any of these like, you basically have a deadline where they're working 1, 2, whatever, however many shifts it takes to get something done to hit a certain opening day, or so on and so forth. So that's like, that's where my interest was. So I was curious if it was similar. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I like the idea of doing different things. I like the idea of same what you said, Austin, is like having the flexibility on keeping a team going, and keeping them working, and when a really exciting project comes up, that you know you make it happen. It's like, there's a balance between that too. And I just had this thought where we've recently lost a job that we priced, and the reason is that, I mean, we were dollar for dollar with the other builder, but the other builder on the day of the client interview had the team, said this will be your super, this will be your project manager, and this job wasn't going to start for a year. And I was like, how? I mean, how? Like, and I sat down with my team. I'm like, how do you know that that's going to be the super and the PM? And when I said it out loud, I'm like, wait a second, he
He
didn't.
didn't.
Yeah,
He just said this is who your
just
super
put
and
names
PM
in.
is, and I was approaching it differently. And I'm not saying he did. They very well might be the super and PM, but it was just the fact that he had the answer where I approached it as, oh, when we get closer, we'll assign them, and like right now they're on other projects. We would need to work through that. The fact that there was uncertainty there is what cost me the job.
Mm.
And that was interesting, and really made us look at the way we present these proposals, because they had said everything else, your proposal, most aesthetic, like you guys walked through it, like we were excited, but the fact that you just didn't have your team figured out, just was, you know, was a level of uncertainty that we just didn't want to deal with. I don't
I
know.
mean, what do you find risk in a job where you don't have the capacity or the team on staff that you have to almost man up to be able to hit the mark for that job? Like that seems super risky to me. Like you're essentially outfitting your job or your crew, your team internally to be able to hit a very specific mark for a very specific job, and it may not take into account the economy or the rest of your jobs or everything else.
Yeah, I mean, we're a little bit bigger now that we have the ability to move guys around if needed and not miss a beat. Like if we've got 5 guys on one commercial project on a big multifamily job, we'll probably be able to get by with 3 or 4 instead of 5 for a couple weeks while we knock out the finishing touches on this other job. We've also talked about, do we create like a 3 or 4 person team for some of these small boutique, more specialty projects that we'd like to go after and say yes to when people ask. We haven't pulled the trigger on it yet, but I think it's something that we might do in the next year or so, is just have a team dedicated to that kind of stuff. And if they don't stay busy, we've got plenty of work on other projects that we can keep guys busy with odds and ends and miscellaneous stuff. So there's a couple different ways to approach it, but yeah, there's a little bit of a risk involved, I think, in taking on stuff that you weren't necessarily planning on.
Sometimes I think there's projects that come across my plate as well where it's like, oh damn, this would be a really sick project. And then a lot of times, and I know Nick, you could probably relate, but it's like you go through the design, you work this out, you figure this job out in your head or on paper, and then you pass it off. And like that was almost the thrill of the hunt, and
Mm.
like sorting out how to do the job was what you were looking for, that scratched the itch, and then you're handing the job off, and then the job's almost more of a pain in the ass than it's worth, or like it's not doing it for you at that point. And that's always the perspective where something comes across my plate that doesn't necessarily fit my bill. I try to keep that in the back of my mind where it's like, this is the thrill of the hunt. This is the thrill of the chase. Once I figure this out, putting the pieces together isn't necessarily what makes me happy or continues to scratch that itch for me. So I balance those things, and I try and keep that in the back of my mind, because any job that I've taken where it's like, yeah, this would be really cool, tends to be really cool. And then like the bloom falls off the rose and you're like, this is the same shit as every other job. I'm just not making as much money doing it, and there's more headaches.
Mm.
Yeah, figuring it out in pre-construction and planning and pricing is kind of half the fun. Like, how the heck are we going to do this?
I think I also that was something I screwed up a lot early on, is that you spend all these months developing the project on paper, and then you hand it off to a PM or a super, and they have no time to digest. And it's like, what do you mean you don't understand it? And they look at you, it's like, Nick, you've been looking at this project for 6 months on paper, and here I am, organizing a demo crew on a project I've spent maybe a week looking at.
How do you fix that though? We have that problem every time we start a new project. I've done all the pre-con, I've planned the job, assigned most of the contracts, everything's kind of ready to go, and then we're ready to start pushing dirt, and we get a PM and a super out there, and they're just like they're rolling right off, fresh off of another project that's maybe not even done yet.
Yeah, and I think that's, Jeff, I'll let you speak to that. Like, I think for me, it's, you have to be super strict with the fact that you need downtime between projects. You need to let them finish that job 100%, hand it over to your warranty manager, and then, hey, you got whatever, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, and for the next couple weeks, you're going to sit in the office and just digest this job. So when we start, you're prepped. And it's probably one of those things that seems like a lot of money to just have a guy sitting in the office digesting a project for a month, but there's probably an argument saying that it will cost less money than him going on a job and screwing something up, or potentially screwing it up.
Yeah, from our perspective, we meet weekly on Wednesday morning at 9 a.m. We have project manager meeting, and it's design team and project managers. So anybody in that room, and there's usually 15 or 16 of us, they're hearing about that project for months, so that by the time it does come to fruition, there's already a storyline. Everybody already knows about it because we talked about it every single week. What's the project update? Well, it's in pre-con, but it's in permitting at this stage, and so that it's top of mind. They've heard the name, they've heard the client name, they've heard the client address, and so by the time it comes to assigning it, everybody's got some familiarity with it, and it doesn't live in a vacuum in only my world. So I think that's how we overcome that that experience.
I mean, you also have to consider that this is what we were just speaking about, like how much easier this makes your job, and how maintaining consistency through projects creates a more efficient, more profitable, streamlined business where it's like, okay, so you're wrapping up a project, and yeah, there's different pieces to the next puzzle, but when it's somewhat all the same type of work, you still are dealing with the same subs, you're still dealing with the same sequencing. With what you're doing, Nick, like every single thing, even with, like, I mean, Jeff's stuff, it's all one of a kind, but you're dealing with the same design elements a lot of times, and you're dealing with subs that understand your standard. Nick, everything that you're doing is one off, where it's like not only do your PMs and supers have to understand the completely different scope, but it's like now they have to figure out how to build this thing that they may never build again or have never built before this. So it's even so much harder to be able to wrap one job up and then dive headfirst into another project when it's like, I have to digest and understand all this, but I also have to figure all of this out because this is like nothing we've ever done before. It's
Yeah.
almost like the ticket is to create a business that feeds the machine, it keeps everything in motion, it makes you your money, and then you have this other side of your business where it's like, this is the shit that scratches the itch for me.
I mean,
Yeah, basically.
I feel like we talk about that a lot, especially offline. It's like, how do you build a business to just do, just do the shit that you like? But anytime that conversation comes up, with anyone, there's always something else. Like, there's always something else that's kind of, a lot, like giving you the quote unquote financial freedom to do that. Right. It's, and what I think Jeff is saying is that the goal is to eventually get where you're only doing the stuff that you want, and the stuff that gave you that financial freedom to do that eventually dwindles out. Like you've built a structure, you built profitability, you've built, essentially. I think that's what we're trying to do with White Oak, right? Where this is designed to be a portfolio piece to change the course of our
Yeah.
business. And but I'm not making any money on that job. Like I'm doing it, it's money in, money out. And and on the back end, like we'll sell it and there'll be a profit, but we'll just turn that into the next one. But the whole intent is for that to be like we're fueling that with something else, allowing us to do what we want to do. But if I were at a point in my career where it's like, hey, what if you only built white oaks and you made a full living, I probably would shift to that model.
Yeah.
But you can't.
Jeff, is
If it
there
were the same house over and over again,
Not the same house. I mean the type of home.
same model.
The same model where it's like these are homes that we're literally designing with no compromise, and doing it for a market that wants it.
So I would say that
I mean,
you would have to be intentional with that messaging, and you would want to make sure that your marketing to the outside world spoke to that, and that your internal communication with your team spoke to that. And I would say that it will take you 3 to 5 years to get to a point where if you focus on just that and you only take what you need to do, what you need to fill the voids, and you don't publicize those, you don't talk about those, you talk about the the product that you really want to be, and you
Mm-hmm.
posture like that's who you are, even though you may not be 100% there yet. You've only got one. But if you posture that
Mm-hmm.
way, and every year, year two, you're going to have a couple more, year three, you're going to have a couple more, year four, you're going to have a couple more. But you have to be extremely intentional that this is who I want to be, and this is how I'm going to get there. If you then, there's a donut shop, I gotta have it. Now you've diluted your effort to getting to that place where you wanted to be. So
Jeff, just so you know, you just said, what'd you say, 3 to 6 years? All Nick heard was 1.5 to 3 years.
It's like I gotta beat that.
Just so you're aware. Is there anything that you, looking, hindsight, for you, Jeff, is there anything that you can look back on and say this came into my life at this point that afforded me the opportunity to step away from what you wanted from like an egotistical perspective and just realize what works for your business? Was it like your kids getting to a certain age? Was it exercise? Was there some sort of external factor that took you out of like the work and placing, and I'm speaking, I don't know if this is actually what you did, but like you placing most of your self-worth and gratification in this business? Was there something that came in that afforded you an opportunity to step back and realize, hey, this is where I need to take the business?
um, yeah, I mean, there's been quite a few transitions, but I wore a tool belt and for the first, let's say, 15 years, and then when I took the tool belt off, my kids were just like little, like your kids' age, and that afforded me the opportunity to be able to go to games and to coach, their teams, um, and then I think at that point, I realized that I enjoyed building houses. I enjoyed building things, but I enjoyed building the business that built houses better,
Yeah.
better. So that sort of is one transition, and then another big transition for us, a big trajectory kind of thing was this old house, and
Mm-hmm.
both on the way in and the way out. We worked with this old house for 4 or 5 seasons, and it was extremely instrumental in some regards, and then we realized that it was forcing our hand in the right job, right client, right budget, to where we were taking jobs to satisfy the needs of next season, and that was not a good business model to follow. So those the way in and the way out were both very, very in a timestamp. They were very influential to the trajectory of our business.
Yeah, I think that a lot of times our business is shaped around what we want and what serves us, where that's not necessarily the best business decision. Like Nick wants to take his business in a direction that like it serves his needs and what he wants to be building from a personal and business perspective, where that's what most of the businesses in residential construction are built around, right? It's like, this is what I want to do, so this is what I'm going to market to be able to build. And it's more so feeding whatever that need is than anything else from a business perspective, where sometimes something comes into your life that you realize, hey, I have a passion aside from just this. I have interest aside from just work and just my job, that allows you enough of an opportunity to step back and say, hey, I don't want to put 110% of my effort into this every single day. How can I sustain the business and be able to explore some other passions within my life that I can afford to do both? And I think that a lot of times when something comes into your life like that, whether it be exercise, sports, golf, hobbies, your children, a lot of times it makes your business more sustainable because you're not approaching business directly from the vantage point of, hey, this is what I want to be doing.
What was that realization process for you like, Tyler? I know you picked up dirt biking as a hobby, and backstory, I was talking to my wife probably a month ago, just one night, and I was like, I need a hobby.
Yeah.
Work all day, come home, you're your dad for a few hours, and then kids go to bed, work for a little bit, hang on, like whatever. Like, I don't do anything fun for myself. I need a
Yep.
hobby. Her response was, we have 3 kids, right? Like, when are you gonna do whatever this hobby is?
Yeah.
Like, good point. I don't know, but like, that's something that's been on my mind a little bit recently too. Is just trying to find a way to like have fun or have an outlet that's not related to work or construction or this group of guys that I'm with all the time.
Yeah. So that, I mean, my entire, it was the same conversation with my wife, and it's nothing, I don't feel like it's something that you can force. I think that COVID, my wife's dad getting sick, a lot of things culminated all at once for me to take somewhat of a different trajectory with business. But like for a long time, I was so hyper focused on doing the things that made me happy that they weren't necessarily most profitable in business. And I've actually been able to work less and make more money and do things like, if I enjoy dirt biking, if I enjoy spending time with my children. So now when I come home from work, I'm not just focusing solely on work or what went right at the job, what went wrong in the job, whether it's exercising, riding dirt bikes, taking a vacation, going away with my kids. I have something in my life other than work. And for years, it was only work. And like that is what made me tick. That's what made me happy. That's where I placed all of my self-worth. And I have somewhat of a social structure aside from work now, that I didn't ever have for 10 years, 12 years of owning my business. And that was huge for me to be able to come home from work and be like, oh, I'm going to look up like this that I want to go do, or I want to go for a run here, or I want to ride my dirt bike with these friends, or go plan a trip around this. Like, I have something to take me outside of work. And that actually has been fairly instrumental in allowing me to work less and find a way to make a little bit more money, not just like being so immersed in work and trying to create something that serves my needs, and feeds my ego just through work.
I think that you
But
guys from Austin, your comment about your wife saying, well, you realize you have 3 kids. I think your hobbies lie within their hobbies. You find what is inspiring for them, what's interesting, what they're interested in, and you run with it. Like that's I signed up. I signed Ryan up for t-ball when he was 7, and then what that my hobby was watching, and then the next year was like sort of coach pitch, and I'm watching a guy who couldn't hit the side of a building, and I got involved, and next thing you know, I coached for the next 10 years, so that my hobby became his hobby,
Mm.
and I think that is where your answer lies. And granted, your kids may not quite be at that age where they start having something that they're interested in. So, you may be a little premature on that, but
My 5-year-old starts
oh, there you
soccer this
go.
year, so
Yeah,
I'm excited. I'm excited for
yeah.
her for that. That'll be fun.
I never really thought of that. I've always, I think, Austin, you and I share a lot of similarities, but I've always thought of it too as like, what's my outlet? And it has to be completely removed from anything else that is tied to, my family, my work, my anything. And, my 5-year-old, I'm coaching his T-ball league this year. And and my wife was like, do you know what you're gonna do? I'm like, I played baseball, like, I'm teaching 5-year-olds,
Yeah,
like, you're
yeah.
just all your goal is to just
Keep them
get
safe
them
and get
interested in
them
the sport,
excited.
yeah, and that's it. And and my 5-year-old, like, he can do, with or without sports, but if he ends up loving it, I never really gave it a consideration that would become a hobby of mine. And I sitting here and like thinking through that, I realized that a lot of the dads, like my kids also, my daughter plays hockey, and a lot of the dads end up on this like beer hockey league because they're at the rink
Yeah,
so much with their kids. And then they're like, hey, you want to play hockey? And I'm like, and I was like, no, not really. Like, I can barely skate. But yeah, I mean, that's just an interesting perspective, Jeff. And I think, my kids are young, and I think as they get older, as their hobbies develop, yeah, I'll want to be part of that. Tyler, you see it, like your kids rip dirt bikes like maniacs.
Yeah.
But
I
like,
mean,
Yeah, dude, your kids are cool.
hey,
Not that my
thanks.
kids are
They're
not,
like
not that my kids aren't cool, but your kids seem exceptionally cool.
but so for me, like, even like my old, they both play softball. Well, thank you. But they both play softball, and like, to go and watch your kids play softball at, right now mine are 7 and 10 years old, it may not be that engaging. It's not that exciting. Like, it's cool, it's fun, there's a social aspect
yeah,
to it. But what winds up being fun is when you start diving into that
yeah,
sport. And like, I understand baseball, but I don't understand how to help my 10-year-old daughter become better. So when you start looking, it's like, I follow people on Instagram that help you coach your kid or coach the team or find
yeah,
techniques to help them, because it's like, I can explain it from my point of view, but I think that when you start digging into that and you start unlocking all of these techniques and knowledge that like you just weren't aware of, that's the type of people we are, where it opens the floodgates. And it's like, well, damn, now I'm just building knowledge that then I can pass on to these young girls who are going to be able to take this and apply this and use it. That's to me what's fun about softball. It's not necessarily going and watching her in a game or sitting around with the parents on a Friday night. Like, it's being able to take a deep dive into the sport to help her reach and meet her goals. And I'm not looking to live vicariously through them, but it's just knowledge that I didn't have before that I can take as far as I want. And it's the same thing with dirt biking and everything else. Like, that's why I enjoy it, because there's so much room for improvement and I can constantly better myself based on exercise, diet, technique, training, and it's endless. And that's, to me, what I find and what I always found enjoyable about work. It's, and however good you want to get, you can get if you put the time into it. And I think that when your kids start partaking in sports that have that same concept behind them, it's when it really becomes engaging for you as a parent or as a coach, whatever that might be.
yeah. I think that's spot on, Tyler. I think that you know, Austin, soccer starting, and you figure out the drills. Like you may know nothing about soccer, But if you can YouTube or Instagram, and you
Yep.
can instantly find out drills that you can go in the backyard and work on this drill, and then you'll get so much satisfaction when you're watching him in the game, and all of a sudden you see the results of that drill that you were working on. And I think that's really where the sweet spot is for you guys. I can say from my experience, I wouldn't trade that for anything. And then if you keep yourself active and healthy enough, once your kids graduate high school, the likelihood that you're going to be involved in their sports is slim to none. That's when
Mm.
you start doing the things that you want to do. Like Tyler, I'm on my bike and I'm doing this and I'm
Yep.
doing that, and I wasn't doing that when my kids were little. So just realize that there's plenty of time. You won't believe how much time you have once kids go, once they go to college or they graduate college. All of a sudden, you got 4 hours available in your day that you didn't have before, and that's the time when
Mm.
you acquire hobbies and you join a golf league or whatever it might be. So. Um,
I mean, and the important, like, to tie this in and bring this full circle as we kind of wrap things up here, like having something, whether it's a hobby for yourself, like Jeff saying, or having something where you can go and help your kids become better at whatever their goals are. When shit hits the fan at work, like it is right now for you, you have something that you don't intentionally have to separate yourself from all of that. You have something that it provides you some sort of respite from the incessant issues at work. It gives you some self satisfaction. It gives you some sort of fulfillment, and it takes your mind and your brain elsewhere. Where it's like, you know what, shit's going bad at work today, but we have a scrimmage tonight at 6:30 for my oldest daughter. Today was chaotic. Everything is upside down, but I'm like, I'm gonna be able to just enjoy her and what they're doing at 6:30 tonight, and that's getting me through this. And I think that it's really important with what we do and how pressing and how challenging our job can be to find a way to be able to detach from that in a healthy manner. And you can definitely lean on your kids for that. And they're coming into the age where you have more of an opportunity to do that if you afford yourself and allow yourself that opportunity. It's just as easy, or if not easier, to just continue to put your head down and work through it. But like Jeff said, that's time you can't get back, and it's something that I'm sure probably cost him a few jobs and a couple of dollars, but he wouldn't trade it for the world.
Mm.
Yeah, it's good perspective and advice.
Doesn't it's never easy, and I don't think that the mistakes, you're never going to completely absolve yourself of all of that shit. Work is work, but there's more important things. And I think that you could probably find some ways to get some fulfillment elsewhere and not just through work and basing your happiness on getting that job or the donut shop type jobs. There's more crap that can make you happy. And I think a lot of times freeing yourself up from that actually makes you a better businessman or woman, because you're looking at work from the numbers perspective and more transactional rather than emotional.
Austin, you guys are done, or are you gonna have more kids? Is that the age old question?
I'm not mechanically done, put it that way.
Damn, I am.
I don't think I don't think we're gonna have any more kids. No.
Yeah,
I think 3 is enough.
3 is a good number.
Nick, do you get a haircut?
Yeah,
You look good.
thanks, bro.
Just noticed.
2 hours
Are
on a
you done?
podcast. Yeah,
I'm mechanically done.
I'm mechanically done.
I'm there at heart though.
Yeah, we'll see. I don't know. I feel like 32. I'm only 32.
Yeah.
I feel like that's too young to have a vasectomy. I don't know why I feel that way, but it just feels too young. So I'm not gonna.
A
do
lot
it.
of people feel that way because they're like, what if they change their mind? But I mean, I know a few people, not firsthand, but I met this kid recently, and his dad was say 65 or like somewhere around that age, and he had a younger girlfriend and she wanted kids, and he had his reversed, and
Wow.
they went on to have kids.
No way.
I was
How do
like,
you have the energy for that
No
at
way.
65?
I don't know.
I'm waiting for
I
grandkids.
have no idea.
Yeah, you're
That's
like
preposterous.
well in the clear at that point. I can't even imagine with my youngest being 7 going back to that, let
Imagine,
alone
like being out of
alone.
diapers for literally like 40 years.
Yeah.
Like now we're still in diapers and it wouldn't be that big of a deal, but
Yeah, that was the way we did it. We just never got out of diapers.
it feels like the end is in sight.
Yeah.
With
Well,
diapers and waking up in the middle of the night and all that good stuff.
Austin, I know we started this podcast with you with your with that whole debacle that you're dealing with, but I mean, I think we went on so many different topics, and I know you sent a list of things you want to talk about. You want to talk about OSHA for some reason. I'm not sure why.
That's fresh in my mind too from a couple weeks ago. I got one of those in the mix right
You
now
want to
as
end
well.
on an OSHA story? Let's end on an OSHA story.
No, it's not anything big deal. We had somebody called in, a roofer on one of our job sites, for not being tied off, and if they show up and do an inspection, that means I have like 6 hours of paperwork to figure out because it's our job site.
You need a safety guy.
Yeah, I know. He's called me, like, he lives in my neighborhood. There's a safety guy in my neighborhood. He's a consultant.
He's probably the one who called
me.
OSHA on you.
I'll get his business.
He lives around the corner from the house we're doing the roof on.
That might be accurate.
Yeah, I need a safety guy. I know.
Just to touch on that, like we have a safety guy on retainer. It's not super expensive. They helped us put our.
No, this guy wasn't either. I just never got around to like getting a scope of work and a contract figured out for him. And
well, it's the same.
Here we are.
We don't prioritize, but for us, we finally, Julian, my operations manager, he was like, "Hey, we got to get this in place." So I was like, "You know what? Fine." He took care of it, got him in place, and within 2 months of having him on retainer, we had a guy fall. And OSHA, immediately showed up in 15 minutes, and he was there in 16 minutes, and he dealt with it. And the OSHA guy was like, "Where's your safety manual? Here you go. Where's your OSHA logs? Here you go." And it's like we had all of our stuff, all of our paperwork clean, and he's like, "All right, you guys are great. You're all set. Like no fine. Like this was obviously just a random act. You guys are in the clear." And just for the record, like the guy, he fell, he got hurt, but he was back to work the next day. He had a pre-existing medical condition that caused him to like pass out or something. But it's the it's a worthy investment, and yeah, I was the same way. I just put it off because I couldn't prioritize it. But Jeff, do you have a safety guy?
Yeah. Yep, but it doesn't mean we're immune to this stuff. We had we had one injury in the last 5 years. A guy had hung his nail gun on the rail of a baker staging and was moving along, and so the way he hung it, the trigger was depressed, and so he leaned into the nozzle and depressed it, and a nail discharged into his side.
I know it doesn't matter, but what size now?
It was a 8-penny ring shank.
It's big enough.
Yeah, it's
big enough.
Yeah,
and thankfully it went into an area that was it was fine. A couple stitches, he was back to work in like 2 days, but that triggered an OSHA visit, and we ended up getting a fine because of the nail gun safety or whatever, and those fines are negotiable, by the way. So but it was like $6,000, $6,000 for just for really a freak accident, and but yeah, so you're not immune.
We should get my safety guy on the podcast because he talks about a lot of this stuff specifically, and just how you're supposed to handle a situation like that, because a lot of guys don't know, and what happens is then they do this inspection of the whole job site, and next thing you know, you got an electrician on site that has a cord that doesn't have a ground prong on it, and boom, fine. And it's like ladder got leaned up against the wall, fine, and it becomes a nightmare.
Yeah, we had another incident where a subcontractor, a flooring sub, cut his finger, went to the hospital. They asked questions. The OSHA guy went to the house, and they were working on the nosing around the staircase, so there was no railing. And we got a fine because there was no railing. Well, he was installing the nosing.
Poor Austin.
Oh, dude, that's tough.
That's
like
I
I can't help but to think that if he does that much work, like you said, Tyler, like this guy's just for some reason got it out for him,
Yeah.
or he's fucking with
I
him.
think they're just posturing. I think that that there's no way that any right-minded person would do that
Right?
if he's
I just feel like it's wrong.
yeah,
Like you'd have to be a special asshole
right.
to make someone especially like there's so many like it's not a complicated house. It's clear span trusses. There's no even the handful of photos he has, it's like, come on,
Yeah.
guys. Like
The fact that he had two other inspectors in the house,
right.
they have eyes. They see
Yeah.
stuff.
He could be like, hey, did you see anything?
Right.
Oh, I just looked at the door.
Yeah,
I didn't see
yeah.
anything else. I'll never forget. I was in. I'm not gonna name the city I was in, but I was at the building permit office, and I was talking to I think I was talking to the electrical inspector, and what was the electrical inspector? Whatever. Either way, I had a question, and he was like, "Oh, you have to come back for like you have to go to a different office. It's like someone else, like another inspector's office." But whatever I had to do, like I wasn't allowed to translate that information. Like it had to come through the electrical inspector. But they were in a feud, so he wouldn't talk to him. He's like, "So just send him an email and copy me on it." I'm like, "He's sitting in the other office. Like you have to go communicate." He's like, "Nope, he's just driving me crazy. I'm not interested." And I'm like, "So I'm at a roadblock because you guys are having a childish fight?" But I mean, yeah, I would hope that Austin makes it through that. But hey, the best thing is now he has a 200
Yeah.
point checklist of how to build a house.
He'll never make that mistake
So,
again, I guarantee you.
no, I would really hope not.
That would be terrible.
Yeah. Well, Jeff, I appreciate you guest hosting today. This was cool. We're gonna get you a new mic though.
Yeah. I need help.
I'm gonna order you a mic.
Okay.
I'm gonna order you a mic. We're gonna ship it down to your studio, office, place, your new 8,600 square foot single person office.
Yep. Single person.
And that way we don't run into the audio issues in the beginning.
All right.
And before we sign off, what do you give us a little lowdown on Sawdust? What's the plan? How often are you releasing episodes?
We're doing one a month, and that's been going well. And Molly is my marketing person. She's been calling you because she wants to sponsor. She wants to be a sponsor. And we figured that,
my bad.
Yeah, that would be a good way for us.
She's burying the lead. She's like, "Do you mind hopping on a call?" I'm like, "I'm really busy. What's going on?" She's like, "We'll find a time."
Yeah. No, we want to talk to you about sponsoring, being a sponsor for the podcast. So that way, we're getting that exposure. Because I feel like it's good content, but we just don't have enough eyes. We're
YouTube's funny, man. I think I said this to you. It's just
slow.
like it's a slow burn.
Right.
Slow burn.
Right.
But you know what? I think that even the few eyes, like you get some quality eyes watching that, because I hear people talk about it, and good quality content, especially in our space.
Yeah.
I mean, is important, and I think it has a long shelf life.
Sure. It has the shelf life is forever, and I learned that from this old house that those guys that company cashed in 40 years worth of episodes that they don't go away. So our feeling is that it's good marketing both for clients, and it's reference marketing. Like when a client has a specific question, I can often steer them toward an episode and say, "Hey, watch minute 13 or whatever," and it addresses that very question or concern or what have you. And then the other thing it does for us is it's great recruiting, because you know, all of the craftsman gurus are diving into this, and that has been sort of the unsung hero in this thing, and that is we get great exposure and great interest in people wanting to come work for us. So,
Love that.
and if the idea would be if we can get this thing to self-support itself, that would be a huge victory. And you know, we've gotten some traction with Andersen, and you know, they seem to enjoy it. But you know, we're gonna look for a little bit more, a little deeper, and you know, see if we can't get it to pay for itself.
That's awesome. Well, speaking of Andersen, thanks to Andersen and Buildertrend for sponsoring this podcast. Make sure you head over to contractcoalitionsummit.com. Join Tyler and I in Minneapolis, May 15th through the 19th. The whole schedule is on there if you want to check it out. We'd love to have you at the summit. I did check in before this podcast, and we are close to sold out on that. So if you're considering it and you have questions, feel free to shoot myself a DM. I'm happy to answer them. Otherwise, get on the website and secure your spot today. We'll see you in May.